Well, I see must be for the township board meetings. They make it a little fast so you can get out a little sooner that way.
No, it's for the people that are professionally late, so they think they're late.
Oh, they think they're late. Okay, that's, that's the key with a meeting. Start on time regularly, then they get used to that, don't they? And my watch still says a tiny bit early, but we might as well start. This hour always, at least for me, I don't know about all of you, but at least for me, it always goes fast. Fastest ones are the teletown halls that we do. Seems like we get started and then it's over. My chief of staff is saying to me, which means we go over, we pay more money than we had planned to pay for that particular time. So this, I appreciate the township giving us the opportunity to use this hall, and we like to get out and do the live town hall meetings and socially distance, mask, whatever is okay with me. And truth in advertising, I've been vaccinated, I've had COVID, survived them both, and I think that in America, ultimately, when we use the science, we accept what we accept as responsibility, opportunity, and accountability for it, we go on with that. So I'm ready for us to get back to as normal as possible, knowing that we have to adapt to pandemics that started, COVID virus that's here, that's bringing on variants and mutating and all sorts of other things, but doggone it, in America, that doesn't keep us down for too long, and I think 18, 19 months has been long enough, and it's time to move forward. That's my opinion. I know it is an opinion of everyone, but it's good to have you here with us today. I want to make it as valuable as we can. We have some posters up here. I see my staff has put here. My position is back to work, back to school, back to health, back to normal. And again, deal with the challenges that we have, but if we haven't learned what we need to do by now, and learned that Dr. Fauci changes like a swinging gate post sometimes, and it goes back and forth. I think this point in time is time to do that. Get back to work. The stimulus that was in initially, and that I voted for, thinking that it would be 2-3 months of stimulus beyond the unemployment compensation people got, has now become an inhibitor for a good number of people going back to work. And if there's any disagreement with that, just drive down the roads and see the hiring signs out there. See the signs that say, "We will train." See the places that will give a signing bonus for people just to come in and sign up to work. And then talk to the business owners, and especially restaurants that are out there, if you want to go and talk with them, that now they're open freely, but they can't keep full hours because they don't have the staff to fill up all of those hours. So that's a challenge. And then the concept that we kind of put forward, if we keep doing this, that don't worry, the government is always there to take care of you. That can blow apart the unbelievable experiment that we have entered back in 1776 as a republic, as a democratic republic, a constitutional republic that said we're going to give people freedom and choice with responsibility and accountability. But in doing that, in 245 short years, we've shown the rest of the world what makes sense. And we don't need to go backwards on that. Inflation is taxation. When the president said at the inaugural address and beyond, that I was there to see and watch and listen to, that any tax increase he put on would not be on anybody that made $400,000 or less. Well, we found out that inflation is a tax on everyone, because it's a tax on everything. It's the cost of everything that's gone up. And when you see gas prices, 45% inflation rate since last year. when you see the cost of milk and meat, when you see the cost of vehicles, etc., everything is going up. So the Biden taxation is inflation. I've asked, and I could ask again today, for any of you who would say that the last administration needed to go because of the policies, let alone the personality. I have yet to hear anybody defend Biden's impact thus far and tell me good points about it. I would love to hear someone tell me anything good that has resulted yet from our president's policies.
Child tax credit.
Child tax credit, who pays for that?
It's a tax credit, right?
It's tax credit. We all pay for that.
And the House passed the bill, the American Rescue Plan, with that. You know.
They passed that. Do they pay for it?
But
Inflation is taxation.
but it's lifting kids out of poverty right now, though. They'd be starving right now, wouldn't they?
No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't be starving. Another one?
Pulled our troops out of Afghanistan. That's it. That's the only thing he did right so far.
I'll give you.
And he did that wrong.
And he did it wrong.
He did it wrong, but I'll give a half. I was going to try to figure out
Yeah.
half credit for that. Yeah,
I'll take it.
yeah, because I think it was time to leave. I think it was time to leave Iraq and Afghanistan. It's time to say, listen, we're not into nation building. We will do our best to give you the opportunity, but there's a point in time where we bring our people home and let you carry on. If you can't do that, you can't do that. And I met with leadership in Afghanistan and Iraq numerous times over the course of the past 10 years or so, and had good intentions, but they've got to be able to do it. No, you're right on that. Was there another one?
I just would rather hear about what you're going to do.
No, but see, that's exactly what happens. There's never anything that positive, and I jumped on that real quick because that's exactly what happens. It's always pushing back to the last administration that brought us a growing economy, low inflation,
You're pushing back. I want to
and all of that. And now people are saying, let's just kind of forget about what this administration is doing. And I'm laying the groundwork as to why I've stood in opposition to a great degree of what this administration is doing because of these type of things. We have an economic crisis with inflation. We've got a crime crisis. Who would say we don't have a crime crisis? You can't go to our major cities today and feel safe about it. I grew up in Chicago. I have grandkids that live in the Chicago area. I worry about them all the time. We've got the crime rampant in the cities. We're worried about January 6th, and we ought to be worried about January 6th, and it should never happen again. But what about all the cities that burned all last summer with the BLM riots and everything went on? Are we worried about that? And that continues on. We're defunding police. And now Portland is saying, well, maybe we ought to hire some more police officers. Didn't work, did it? We got a border crisis. Who would say we don't have a border crisis? I was just talking to a gentleman just outside about the fact of COVID coming across, fentanyl coming across. The scourge of fentanyl that was going down the last 2 years of the last administration because we took action on it. We closed the border to illegal activity, and you weren't hearing about it, were you? And yet we were still dealing with the humanitarian crisis. We were still giving more magistrates at the border to hear people who are trying to come across legally. We were getting that done. And now, not only are they coming across in rampant fashion, 5 straight months now of over 180,000 illegal immigrants contacting border police. That's a challenge. That little face of Abraham Lincoln on this penny, pretty small. You can't see the ear, can you? But if you could see the ear, the particles of fentanyl that could fit in that ear of Lincoln, pure fentanyl, would kill one person in this room. and pounds are coming across the border that we've caught. And we're concerned about that we didn't catch. National security crisis. When you have China from their lab able to release accidentally or otherwise, and I hope we can ultimately have a true commission that looks into that and gets to the bottom of whether it's done by world nations doing it or the United States doing it, and find out what really happened. But the impact that that has had on our national security. The CCP has its tentacles in all over this country, in our universities, near our naval facilities, military facilities, building up port settings in our major port areas, cybersecurity attacks that we've had just this year, rivaling anything we've seen in the past, and an energy crisis. We were energy independent up until January 20th. Energy independent. We didn't have to buy a pint of gas or fuel or oil. We were mining those, drilling those resources, exploring those resources on our own lands, including our own federal lands. We were exporting LNG to other countries around the world. We were saying to Russia, we don't need anything from there. We're saying to Saudi Arabia, we don't need anything from you. And all of a sudden, things changed. We shut down the Keystone Pipeline with 11,000, at least 11,000 jobs, union jobs. And the same president then gave a waiver to Russia for their Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So we gave Russia, the communist country, the ability to put a pipeline in that competes with our NATO allies. And we shut down our own union-built pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline. Oh, and by the way, Line 5, they'd love to shut down here. And the impact upon that, our farmers, our manufacturers, you know, by the way, those of us who drive, still drive internal combustion engine vehicles, it's already added cost to us, the concept of what's taking place there. So that's what we're looking at, and that's why I say, give me some good news about what this administration is doing to help me out for the future of votes that we're looking at, whether it's infrastructure bill, and we can talk about that today, or whether it's the add-on bill that Nancy Pelosi says the infrastructure bill will not pass without this social policy $3.5 trillion addition on it. I mean, that's what we're facing right now. That's what you're not reading in the national media. And that's why we have these town hall meetings all across the 7th District. In large communities and small communities, townships, villages, cities. So at least to some degree, we can get some information out so now we're not living in the fact that we can divorce all of this so we don't have to do this. Yeah, I'm mad. I'm angry that a country as great as America is in the tough times that it's in right now in every area of our life. And there are people out there that are letting this happen, and the major media is making sure you don't know about it. And I'm sick and tired of that. And I'm just a mild-mannered man. So I'm enjoying life. I have grandkids. If you got grandkids, you know the joy of having grandkids. At the very least, you can get even with your kids. I have a privilege of representing a great district, and I still live in the greatest country on the face of the earth. But it's a country worth defending and fighting for. That's my start to it. Questions?
Can you tell us about the political work that you did on your 2-week trip to Uganda last month and why you never posted anything publicly about that?
I misstated in a statement I made, I think on a radio. Political work wasn't what I did. I talked politics. I met with the president, and I'd like to not mention the country's name.
I mentioned it already in my question. It was Uganda.
I wish you wouldn't do that. And I'd ask you to understand, here's why. I have a family living in that country. Granddaughters, son-in-law, and daughter. My life is always challenged. I have threats on my life. I have threats on my house. There are terrorists all around this world. And there are terrorists in Africa that could find out, just like you, find out where my family lives. And so I was disappointed in my colleague who made a statement on C-SPAN in a committee hearing that I was attending virtually while I was in Africa. I've said Africa.
It was Virginia Fox.
But Virginia Fox did that, and I'm disappointed she did it, because I would have never said the name of the country. So I'm asking you, if there's any goodness and humanity in you, that you would not broadcast any further the name of the country, because I do not want a terrorist firebombing or kidnapping my granddaughters just because I'm an American congressman. So let me tell you, that I had to do that so you wouldn't go any further on it.
I'm going to go further on it.
Oh, I know you are. We'll only go so far.
Where's common sense fall into play?
But let me answer your question, Steve. Anytime I'm over in that country, if I have an opportunity to meet with parliamentarians, who I have a number of friends in parliament there, I have a close personal relationship with the president. And if he has time to meet with me, we meet. And we talk as friends. And we talk about government issues. We talk about politics in the United States, what's happening here. I'm not going to tell you our exact conversation, that's personal. But you can assume that I'm political, I work in government, he's political, he works in government. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about my grandkids. I'm going to talk about his grandkids. I'm going to talk about his farm, his ranch, any more cows that he has, those type of things. And we're going to talk about infrastructure in that country. We're going to talk about, potentially about America doing some trade with that country. We're going to talk about COVID. We're going to talk about vaccines. All of those things could be part of our conversation. That came as a result of me having a long-time relationship, because I have family that live there, and I've developed over time friendships within Parliament and including the President's office. That's what it was. I was over there to see a brand new baby girl, my third granddaughter born over there, to reacquaint with my wife who had been there already 4 weeks, and spend time 2 weeks during our July 4th recess. The last day of those 2 weeks, having spent time with my two granddaughters that are my best buddies, and meeting my newest granddaughter, building a bunch of racks for their storage compartments, putting some shelving in their closets.
I'm really not interested in any of your
And so, no, you're going to hear what I'm going to say about that event, because you're trying to cast aspersion on it, when in fact it was just a trip to be with family during those 2 weeks.
So did you also talk about the tourism
Can't you
industry?
shut up?
No, let's let him finish. He's making my point.
Did you also talk about the tourism business and your family's tourism business while you were there? You're featured all over the East Africa tourism industry website on their front page.
Oh, he's a good. Yeah, but right now, my son-in-law is a traveling
You're
safari.
featured. I'm talking about you. You're featured all over the front page of the East Africa tourism industry website.
I didn't know that. Well, that's pretty special.
So did you talk about the tourism industry while you were there? And
I don't remember talking about it with the president. I talked about my son-in-law.
So what if you didn't talk about it? What's your point?
And if you
I'm gonna lose my job because I won't get a
COVID vaccine next month, and you want to talk about him seeing his grandson.
This is
Here,
Steven.
let's talk about priorities.
Steven spends his life researching everything about my life, every word that I state. He gets a transcript of every single interview that he can find on radio that I've done. That's what he does. But let me answer it this way.
Hold on a second, Steve, are you part of this community? Are you in Monroe County?
Yeah.
He's Monroe
we're
County.
15 minutes away.
Yeah, he's Monroe County.
Tim, when we asked this-
Glad he's here. So let me finish it with this. I didn't talk about tourism. Next question.
Okay, let's bring up her point here. We've got people who are gonna lose our jobs if we don't get a vaccine, so-called vaccines, right?
Mhm.
If we don't get it. Problem, this is not a vaccine. By the CDC's own definition, these shots are not vaccines. They're being protected by the Government Act. This is experimental, unlicensed. We're being socialistically told we have to get it or we're gonna lose our jobs. How are we protected?
Yeah. Again, this is an emergency drug right now. It hasn't been given final approval by FDA. It ought to. It ought to have that.
It shouldn't. It's not safe. It's already
Well-
killed 45,000 people. It's not talking about.
It's saved a lot of people. I'm not going to get into
Okay,
that.
so your
It's saved a
point
lot
is
of
You
people.
gotta sacrifice some to save some.
No, I'm not.
Right?
No, I'm not saying that.
It's.
But let me answer the question. You're about as rough as Steven right now.
I'm gonna.
Okay, let me answer the question. I took the polio vaccine when I was a kid, a number of times. People died from the polio vaccine early on,
Yeah, because they found out there was poison in it after long-term
Yeah.
studies were done.
but saved hundreds of thousands of people to this very day. There's vaccines for pneumonia. I've taken a pneumonia vaccine. There's vaccines for flu, influenza. Sometimes I've taken it, sometimes I haven't. These are choices that we make. We make it on the best information we have.
Exactly, choices.
Choices
Choices.
and on information which they're not
Choices.
giving us.
Yeah, they're
We've
trying
had
to
more
take our
people die.
choices away.
Let me finish my statement. I'll answer your question. I don't think you should have to take a vaccine. I will oppose any mandatory vaccination requirement. In the private sector, though, General Motors or a hospital, if they are a private entity, if we believe in what America is set upon, private industry can do things.
But they're taking
And
government
make
money.
requirements.
They're not private industries, they're getting government money.
Sadly, a lot of them are getting government money.
So that you can't call them private industries.
Well, they are. They are by definition a private industry. General Motors, Ford,
Well,
Chrysler is.
The government will say, we're gonna cut off the money to you.
Yeah, and they ought to. They ought to. I didn't support the bailout of General Motors, for instance. But the key is, I don't think you can have an entity like the government mandating that for its people, for its federal employees. I think that's absolutely un-American what they're doing. I will oppose that in every case. But if a hospital says, a local hospital that is private hospital, ProMedica for instance, if they say in order to work there, if you're going to work with our patients, we're going to require you to have it, the choice is either to stay there or go find some other hospital.
What about me? I've had COVID.
Yeah, I do. I have too.
And I was off work for about a month. I go in for regular testing with my blood. I've got more antibodies than people that get the shots. And why should I have to get a shot if I got more antibodies? I get, the Blue Cross.
I don't think you ought to.
Want me to donate my
Yeah.
blood.
Let me answer it directly to you. I don't think you ought to be required.
But how do we stop these private sectors from demanding it?
Well, I think it's the same pushback that you see from the other side that shut down cities, shut down law enforcement agencies. We don't go out and be violent, but I think we have to speak up very strongly. It takes numbers to do that type of thing. Today I was called early this morning by a meat processor, hog processor in my district, who had to shut down for the day because his employees in the kill room, that's what it is, it's a kill room, walked in to this type of temperature, and under the requirement of Department of Agriculture, they have to wear masks. Well, this heat, all 10 of them walked in and said, sorry, we are not going to wear masks today. I asked the owner of this processing plant, have you had this problem before? He says, no. The agriculture inspector that is here on the kill floor any day we're doing killing of the animals for the processing has always been very good about it. He says that technically I've got to require it to wear a mask, but on a heated day like that, a day with humidity, if you pull it down underneath your chin, I'm okay with it. Well, I said, why isn't he doing it today? He said he's on vacation for a week. And the new guy in is not allowing that to happen. So that's a challenge that
Which plant was that? What was
that
the
we have.
company?
I'm not telling you. You make enough problems anyway. I mean, this is the type of stuff you get. Not concerned about the fact that these people aren't going to receive their pay today, but for their own health, one government official understands you're not going to get it done, and they've had no outbreak at this plant the entire time. But for health reasons, not working in 100+ degree temperatures with humidity with their masks on. Some people are concerned about that. The guy will come back again. I don't want to get him in trouble, but I also want to see the plant continue to move on. And they do it in the proper way. They have disinfectants and all of the rest. But that's the challenge that we have. Now if you mandate also the vaccine, and you have some of these people say, I can't do this, I'm not going to take this, the plant owner has to listen to that and say, I'm not sure I can afford putting the mandate on. Folks, that's what we're going to have to do. The other side, including Indivisible, that this gentleman represents, is unwilling to set aside. They're going to take over America. They're going to change us into something that we have never signed on for.
Accountability.
And we have to stand up.
Scary. Government
And we have to say America's a place for freedom.
Socialism is accountability, that's what you want?
So,
Indivisible is not socialism.
so anyway, that's my answer. I stand opposed to all mandatory vaccinations requirements. Only reason I got a vaccination is because I don't get on an airplane to travel to a country to visit my granddaughters if I don't have it. I can't change that airline strategy or the country I'm going to.
No,
So
but
you
you
gave
can't
in,
change
so you
here
gave
either.
into it.
Nobody's changing here, and that's the thing, you're saying stand for it, but.
I gave into it. You bet I gave into it.
But the hospital employees, we worked through it without a vaccine.
But here, a year
And we're,
ago.
oh, you're
Okay,
gonna-
how many of
now we're
you,
gonna get-
how many of your colleagues are willing to stand with you?
Not many, because you know what? They all have young kids, they have jobs, they have debts. They're like, I have
Okay.
to have a job.
That's what you deal with. And you've got to have a job too, so you got to decide whether you stay there or go some other
There's
place.
nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to go. Every single hospital.
They're all playing the same game.
It doesn't matter, they're all gonna get it, they all.
I wish, you know,
But they can put these people in nursing homes and watch
I agree.
thousands of elderly
Oh, I agree.
die.
I agree.
And those people should be held accountable.
I agree.
They should be in jail for what they did.
And this state elected an attorney general that refused to take action on that, right?
Yes.
Right? Again, it goes back to the people, we the people. We've let this slide for a long time. I'd love to tell you that I'd be willing to go put through legislation that would tell private sectors, you can't do X.
Why
So
can't
put
you?
it through, even if it gets denied.
That's
why
not
can't you
America.
go ahead and try it?
That's not America. Do you want bigger government?
No, I want government to back off, so put legislation in.
You
to
want
back
bigger?
off.
That the government's not doing that in your case.
They are.
No, they aren't.
You don't think that Henry Ford and Beaumont and U of M and all of these hospitals aren't hooked to the whatevers of the whoever's that pay them whatevers?
Oh, no.
That's where all the money comes from.
I-
That's exactly what
I don't
they're
disagree
doing.
with
This
that.
has to do with Fauci
The government
all the way
says-
down.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
all the people
yeah.
with their
You know
heads
what
up
it
this butt.
boils down to?
Yeah.
We need term limits. That way we get everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's worked in Michigan.
The government says
Let-
we
let-
can't discriminate on race, yet you're allowing these companies
To
to discriminate against us because of a vaccine. That is
Absolutely.
not safe.
But do you think that discrimination on the base of race, as it's established, We're not talking about the Equal Rights Amendment or the Civil Rights Amendment. We're talking about other things. Do you think that's a responsible way of dealing with freedom in our government? Of course not. But you're asking me to put through legislation to force private sectors across the board
To not listen to the government.
to not listen to the government.
Yes.
And so the government will make that law, and
So
the
then
private
that's
sector
free
will
choice.
have to listen to the government in that law. Do you understand how absurd that is?
It's less absurd than all the other
Freedom is
stuff.
what we're looking for. We didn't have this problem in the past until we got big government. And we let that happen. I'm telling you what you're asking because it touches you. You want the government to take care of you, specifically. To hell with all the rest of the impact that it has.
Well,
I understand what you're saying.
You don't. Your
No,
job's not on the line. You're not losing your income.
You
Your
should
entire
have
house
the-
is not on
You
the
think
line.
my job isn't
You
on the
don't
line?
understand. No.
I've got a Speaker of the House that will charge me $1,000 for entering the chamber without going through a metal detector. That's never happened before.
She can't fire you.
And we're going to take her out this next election. We're going to take her out. And a lot of this stuff will go away if we take the party in power right now in the House, the Senate, and the White House out of power.
I agree.
But if you're asking me to do something that goes against free market capitalism, freedom of choice in this country, and limited government, I can't do
But
that.
government's
There
telling
you
private
go, freedom
restaurants-
of choice.
Government
The
telling
government's
private restaurants
private.
that they have to check for vaccine passports. The government telling private hospital systems that they have to have everybody vaccinated. The government doing that is not freedom. The government is the one telling them that they have
Who
to.
controls that food processor
The
today?
government.
No, who controls that food processor today?
The inspector that
Who
belongs to the
control, no,
government.
you didn't get it. Those 10 people that stood up and said no.
It's not
10
true.
people-
The other guy that was there before let him pull their mask down. and-
10 people stood up and said no. Now, if that continues on, that food processor has to decide, am I going to take the risk of losing everything or paying some fines to the federal government? I bet he says, I'll pay the fines, but I'm not going to lose my employees or my business over this thing.
So if we got 30% of the nurses in a facility,
They don't
walk
care.
out,
Just
say
another
no.
number.
Well, we've seen them walk out for other reasons. We see teachers walk out.
They don't care.
Well, they're government employees and nothing happens.
Well, come on, go with the illustration. You want something easy. You don't want to do the hard work, because it's me. It's me, and I'm the most important person in the room right now, right? No, you aren't. The bigger system of our freedom in this country and limiting government and moving it back is the most important thing. I feel for you. I didn't want to take that vaccine, but I want to see my granddaughters. And it's been okay for me. But you have a choice to not do it, and if you make that choice, you suffer the consequences or the benefits.
Why didn't you want to take the vaccine?
So what happens when you can't buy food if you're unvaccinated?
No response.
Go pay somebody to go shopping.
Well, that again is something we're going to.
This is gonna be a physical civil war within 5 years.
It well could be.
Physical
I
civil
hope.
war.
I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope it 4 or 5 years. But if we talk just like this, as opposed to saying, how do we change this? We change the government makeup. We get Nancy Pelosi out of the speaker's seat. We get Chuck Schumer out of the majority leader. We get the White House changed. That takes effort. It's not simple solutions.
Okay,
It's the corruption that runs it all.
Okay.
assuming that what you're saying is gonna happen, that this next election, we get Pelosi and Schumer out, we take, before we can have that accomplished, they're in the process now, and it's going to go through these two massive bills that are going to destroy our country. What can we do to stop that?
I'm going to vote no.
I was just gonna ask you about that.
I mean, you ought to know that.
But what
You ought to know
else?
that.
Isn't the vote
That's
today?
not gonna stop it.
Uh,
I mean, your one vote
So,
isn't gonna do it.
okay, so what do you want me to do?
I don't know, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying, what can we do?
The only thing you can do is keep a member of Congress in, whether it's me or someone else, that will vote to limit government. And sometimes have to say, I'd love to spend that, there's a need out there, but I'm not spending that. Understand I won't do that in my own budget. You won't do that in your own budget, and the government shouldn't do the same.
Can you tell us why you
Now,
didn't wanna-
that's the issue.
Can you tell us why you didn't want to take the vaccine?
I didn't say I don't want to take the
Yeah,
vaccine.
you did. You said I didn't want to.
No,
take the
you
vaccine.
jumped on it. Stephen, you do it all the time.
You said, that's exactly what you
If I
said.
have time, I'll answer that afterwards.
Probably the same reason why nobody else wants to take the damn thing.
No, it wasn't that.
I absolutely want to take the
Okay,
vaccine.
let me
Well,
answer
so
it.
you
Number
have
one,
it?
Let me-
Wait, do you have it, Steven?
Yeah, I took both doses. Pfizer.
Let me answer it. Let me answer
Why do you
it.
guys have a mask on?
Let me answer it.
Because you can still transmit.
Hey,
but they don't-
this isn't his town hall. Don't ask him. I didn't want to take it because I didn't think I needed it. I had COVID.
So you just admit you didn't want to take it.
I didn't want to take it because I had COVID. So why take it? I told the attending physician, why do I take a dose away from somebody else who can use it, who hasn't had COVID? Is that okay, Stephen?
The House physician, I'm sure, had plenty of supply for everybody in Congress.
No, not necessarily.
We've talked about
Save
this
it.
issue a lot, we have a lot of questions to get to.
Let's get to another question. And let me end by this. This is elective government. I will represent you and 750,000 other people. And I try to do it under the confines of the Constitution. I don't want to change the Constitution. Even if you want me to change it for your specific thing, that sounds good right now. Go away and think about it a little bit more, what that might mean in the future, adding more and more layers of government saying you can and can't do this. That's what I have to deal with every day when I make a decision I'm going to vote. Even though guys like Stephen will attack me for whatever vote it is.
Ooh,
Next question.
accountability, ooh.
David from South Rockwood writes, I know it is not up to the House to vote on the infrastructure package, but I certainly do not want a mileage tracker on my car. Would you support that when it comes to the House for vote? And also worker shortage, what can we do?
I think I've already said, I'm not voting on what'll end up being is over $5 trillion package, because Nancy Pelosi says the infrastructure package cannot pass the House without the other $3.5 trillion added to it. We're looking at over a $5 trillion package in the end of legislation that has Green New Deal, personal trackers of how you drive, dealing with what you're going to pay for the infrastructure that we put in place, select proposals to make sure that we undo racist infrastructures. I don't know what those are. Pete Buttigieg says that there has to be something so our highways aren't racist. I'm not sure what that means, but I have my concerns of what I'm going to find out. Direct union requirements for construction. Only $110 billion, only $110 billion of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure package is for roads, bridges, the normal infrastructure we talk about, including broadband. So that's a challenge. As far as workforce, number one, we have to have our governor do what about 26 other governors have done. End this supplement to unemployment. If that ends, people go back to work. They can't say, you know, I'm making almost as much, if not more, by staying home unemployed with the supplement I get. So why should I go back to work?
Okay, I know you're part of the federal Congress. Do you have any input or influence at all on the state?
Well, as a citizen, I try to have influence. I talk with my legislators. I even send letters to the governor. When she was in front of our committee on a couple occasions, Energy and Commerce Committee, I asked her some tough questions. But she does not listen to me much. Hopefully my legislators do, and we keep in contact with them.
John from Newport writes, how many illegals are in our state and county?
I have no idea. This is one thing you need to know. Relative to the border crisis, we are a border state. Not simply because we have a northern border, but Iowa is a border state. Illinois is a border state. Because these illegals are being shipped to states all around the United States.
Why
don't we know where they're going and how many there is?
They won't tell us, and the national media won't ask.
They're worried about losing their job for the vaccine.
Yeah, but they
And
come
we
in
got all these
unvaccinated,
illegals coming in.
Absolutely.
Unvaccinated, and we don't even know where
Yeah.
they're going.
And we tell the Cubans that you can't come here. We will deport you immediately when we catch you if you don't touch ground. It begins to look political, doesn't it? And we've got cartels that are making millions of dollars off of illegal immigration, human trafficking, sex trade. I talked with a guy 2 weeks ago who talked about, has a contracted security force, of seeing the rape trees along the route to our border, where females, young children, as well as adults, are tied to a tree and raped in the process of coming up here. And we're not concerned about the humanitarian crisis at the border as well as illegal immigration. I mean, it's unbelievable that we are concerned about COVID and we're talking about vaccine passports and mandates for our own people who can make good decisions based upon the science and make the choices that they feel most comfortable with. And we're letting illegals come in and not even test them for COVID if they don't.
They close the Canadian border.
If they don't want to be tested,
Close the Canadian border.
and not giving them a COVID vaccine required,
That's a vicious
and then
circle.
shipping them out. Steve Scalise, the minority whip in the House, the guy who was shot, almost died in that baseball incident a few years ago, came back from a trip down to Texas to see the border, see the cages. They were called back during the Trump administration. Now they aren't called cages. Same things I've seen. And he saw people that were given in these centers, given their manila folder with instructions on what to do when they arrived at their next destination, sitting on the same plane that he was flying on back to DC. No testing, no certainty of whether they had COVID or didn't have COVID, and going. This is the border crisis, and it infects the entire nation.
You
And
told that
again,
same story
elections
with
have
Bob Latta
consequences, don't they?
recently.
Elections have consequences. This wasn't happening up till January 20th, and now it is. Next
You
question.
told that same
Carrie
story about
from-
Bob Latta.
Carrie
though,
from
on
Carlton,
the
there's some questions here other than yours.
Bob Latta saw that.
Okay.
Same thing.
Neither of them have said anything publicly about witnessing that.
Carrie from Carlton writes,
Go check a little further into Steve Scalise. You'll find out you're absolutely
like
wrong.
where?
Carrie from Carlton writes, change the notification notice for rezoning.
Let me stop right here. As he laughs and says that, he's lying through his teeth about Steve
Well,
Scalise.
tell me where I can find it.
Okay, next one.
So Carrie writes,
This is
change the
Bob Latta and Steve
notification
Scalise
notice
on the same
for
thing.
rezoning law. That would either be a state issue or Supervisor Reed might be able to answer that question. So we'll pass on that one.
Can we clarify
Let's-
Change the notification notice for rezoning law.
Well, the reason is they're trying to put a warehouse, a giant warehouse, right over on Woah Road, in the middle of a residential section, and only like one person was, it has to be within 300 feet. So when the first notice went out, there was only one person notified, although it affects everybody in that entire block, including 500 families that live in the trailer park. So we would like to see that law change, because had we not known somebody who knew somebody that happened to be at the meeting, nobody would even have known this giant thing would be in. And so we're working hard to.
That'd be at the state and local level. I'd make sure you contact your township officials that you
They
can.
said no.
Well, then, talk
They said
to
we
your,
have to come
talk
to
to,
state.
talk to your state officials. I'm not there. That'll have to be your state representative or senators.
Anyways,
Ken from Carlton writes, fair elections, exclamation point.
We want fair elections. Who doesn't want fair elections? Well, I can think of some people, but by and large, we want fair elections. That's all we're asking for. The new laws have been put in place in Georgia, Florida, and other spots, Texas. They aren't restricting elections at all, except saying that you have to follow the rules. And the key issue that the leftists fight is ID. I mean, think of the number of things you have to show an ID, and nobody says that's discriminatory. And in our state, you can get a free ID, state ID, if you don't have a driver's license. You can go to Secretary of State's office. Of course, the other side said, well, what if they don't have a car? You can do it online. What if they don't have a computer? Hey, in America, there are ways to do this. Why shouldn't I be certain that when you vote, you are the voter and you are a licensed voter? Whether you're a Democrat or a socialist, if you are registered to vote, you have a right to vote. I don't like the way you're going to vote, but at least I know you have the right to vote. That's what they're standing against. There are no laws that said you can't give water bottles. That's what the national media has put out and the leftists have put out. That's not true.
And
They just said
put out.
campaign activists can't go to the people in the line, hand it out. It can be given out by the township. It can be given out by individual citizens. It can be given out by election workers. Or people can bring their own water bottles. I mean, this is the type of stuff that's going on. No, I want to see election reform. I want to make sure in Michigan we don't have a Secretary of State that violates our Constitution last election and did things with sending out absentee ballots and telling clerks that they didn't have to do certain things about absentee ballot signatures. Fortunately, a court stood on them on that one after the election. After the election.
I think I got 2 delivered.
That shouldn't be done. That's all we're asking. Do you want to go through another election like this last one? No, I don't want to go through that. I don't have friends and family members, community members at each other's throats over an election. It didn't happen before. Now we said because of COVID, we're going to do some of these changes this time. Okay, but we went way beyond. And we have to move back to rationality. This does not go on in a first world country. It shouldn't, and it should never do it again.
Why don't we prosecute these people with the election fraud, all that crap that went on in Detroit? Myself, I went to vote and was told that I had already submitted a absentee ballot. I never even got one.
Yeah. Again, that's the frustration.
So my vote's negative.
That's the frustration I share with you. I'm in the legislative branch. I believe that these are states' rights issues. But I did sign on to a bill that would require in federal elections, which is the presidential election, that all states do it the same way and the same requirements. For the state house, state senate, township offices, county commission, all that, let the locals and the states decide how they do it. But for the federal elections, there ought to be harmony on how we do it. But that comes down again to the courts. And when courts, like we have in the state of Michigan right now, the Michigan Supreme Court is purely political. And it's worth a warm pitcher of spit. I've said that many times, I'm sure you'd put that down. We have a problem when they won't even take up for evidentiary hearings some of these challenges that are put there. We know that in Wayne County there's been fraud going on for years and years. We know that. Was there more this time than before? Maybe. But when the courts won't take the cases, and then you have some of the cases brought, I don't know who the lawyers were that put it together, but didn't do a good job. But nonetheless, that's where we're at. So I think right now, 2022 has to be in our focus. What's past is past. Those that are going to deal with some of those things will continue to work through the process. But for most of us, it's just making sure that we keep our eyes on the ball, that the next election, whether we're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Socialist, whatever, we say, get it right this next time, and what are you doing to get it right? That's what I'm asking my state legislators, and they are taking action on it. And anything they do that goes to the point of ID, they get harangued. But that's the most crucial thing that we need, so that we know if you voted, you were legally allowed to vote. And if you weren't, get out of here.
Tim, what about the voting machines themselves?
Yeah. I think that's, again, the state legislature on down, telling the state Secretary of State what she can or can't do. That's where it has to happen. And if indeed there was a particular voting machine that caused all of this and did some illegal or untoward things, we ought to find that out. But again, that has to happen at the state level. State legislature and local clerks have to be on the bubble, as it were, to make sure that those things don't happen in that particular voting precinct and don't happen again. Even the uncertainty of whether there was some of that stuff going on, it has to be taken out.
You're not satisfied that they already looked into that? and, like-
Jim from Newport is asking the question, who do you think will be a good governor?
Anyone, but I think it has to be a governor that understands the beauty of what America is, and that the people and the freedom they have to be protected under no uncertainty.
How about Ryan Kelly?
I think you need to look at governors who've shown that they believe that people, given good information, are smart enough to make their own decisions.
Have you met Ryan
And see,
Kelly?
that would deal with your problems as well. When Kristi Noem, a good friend of mine, I served with her in Congress for a number of years, governor of South Dakota, simply says, listen, we could make all sorts of mandates for the people of South Dakota. But I think South Dakotans are smart enough to make their own decisions, and those that aren't smart enough will have to abide by the consequences. But we're going to give them the science, we're going to give them the opportunity, we're going to give them the capability of having masks, of vaccines, of whatever. But then they make their decision. We are not going to shut our state down.
What do you think of Ryan Kelly?
Let me answer my questions. That wasn't your question.
It was part of that question.
That wasn't your question.
Fine, don't
Steven,
answer it.
you love being irritating, and you're irritating this room of people. And we're answering the questions.
You didn't name anybody.
And I'm not going to give you a name of
Okay.
anybody.
Jerry,
I'm going to give you the names of people that we ought to be looking toward as being examples. And Kristi Noem was one of those. Ron DeSantis, who I never thought would be the governor that he's turned out to be. He was in the locker room with me every morning. And yet, I've been unbelievably impressed by his strength of character, his resolve to say, Floridians, we're going to have problems. Some of you are going to get sick and some will die. But we're also looking at the other things that could be even worse for Florida. These are the things we're going to do. Those are governors that establish, I think, a pattern that we ought to look for in any governor candidate, be they Republican or Democrat, that takes on Gretchen Whitmer, who has shown a direct disregard for you and me, who has said we are not smart enough to take care of ourselves. And what was her outcome in relationship to the other states? Let's be generous. No better, no worse. And yet, we shut down our economy, we shut down our schools. Some of our kids will never make it up. They will never make it up. They don't have time to make it up. And they will bear the consequences for the rest of their lives, like I bear with the new math they tried to run in the school when I was a kid, and messed me up in great ways that wouldn't have been had they not tried an experiment on me. So this is the same thing that's going on. Look for governor candidates like that, and don't look for governor candidates that just evidence some of those things. Also think, can that person win? Can that person going up against a female governor, can they win? You got to think through all of that. And I can't tell you 100% who could win. I can't. But it can't be just gut throb that says, well, I like this person, he says exactly what I believe in, and he's fighting. Well, that very personality may cause that person not to be able to win. I want Gretchen out of there. After one term, I want her out.
And Betsy DeVos is
She's
the
hurt
person
this
to do
state.
it.
And so let's think smart, strategically, and I think Democrats and Republicans who want to see the state turn around can think that way together and can even cross lines to not extend the pain that's taking place in Michigan.
Charles from Carlton writes, what are you doing to stop the Marxist takeover and the destruction of our country, and how can I help?
Well, I think you've heard some of what I'm doing. We're standing up strong on those issues. You just have to see, go to my website, go to the Facebook, Instagram, and see people like evidence in this room today and the things they're saying about me. Look at the billboard on Telegraph that says that I don't believe in democracy. It took that totally out of context.
That was taken down. The new one's up on 223 and Adrian, if you want to see
The
it.
new one's up.
Steven, would you please shut up? There's about 30 other people in this room. I've had enough of your nonsense. Please stop.
Yes.
He makes the point for me, so sorry about that. But what they did when they said, so you don't believe in democracy? No, I don't believe in democracy. I believe in a Republican form of democracy. It's constitutional democracy. Democracy has never worked. In Greece, in Rome, never worked because it ended up being the majority controlled the minority and stomped on them. Here we say yes, and majority controls with a constitution that allows the minority to be protected as well. The Constitution is our guide. So I believe in a republic. That's a constitutional democracy. That type of stuff is going on. You need to be writing letters to the editor. You need to be getting your friends and neighbors to think about America as a nation that established the pattern for the world. When I visit heads of state and parliamentarians all over the world, their concern is not what our media is concerned about. They're concerned that America is a strong nation, and without America being strong, then China and Iran and Russia take preeminence. They don't like that because they know that America never, ever mandates, when they help another country, mandates them change their entire country. That won't be true with China and with Russia and with Iran. They get that. And so we have to stand strong and get our friends and neighbors and family members to start thinking rational about what America is. It isn't government giving you everything. It's not government mandating upon others for your benefit. It's not big government, it's limited government. And in fact, it's less federal government and more state and local government. That's where the power in our Constitution flowed from. It doesn't today. It doesn't today. When you can have a Fauci, unelected, or a Dr. Khaldoon here in Michigan, unelected, make mandates that impact our entire life and livelihood. If you talk to me about people I know who put their entire life into starting a business and had it taken away this last year, through no fault of their own, it makes my pain and my problems seem silly in comparison to what went on. And we have to stand up. And when I take tough votes, as I will take on this infrastructure bill,
So you're against it?
and certainly on this crazy $3.5 trillion bill coming up.
So you're going to vote against the infrastructure?
I haven't seen the
already said
infrastructure
that.
bill yet.
Shut up and listen.
I haven't seen the infrastructure bill yet. But if it's attached to 3.5, I'm voting against it. But I haven't seen that bill yet. It's 2,500 pages. Most senators don't know what's in it yet. I'm not lying to you. Most don't know what's in it fully. Just came out yesterday. Joe Manchin, of course, he's a key vote on that $3.5 trillion bill. They found contract for his wife in the in the budget bill, the reconciliation bill that's being put forward. That's what they're willing to do. We have to be willing to stand up against that stuff, even though we'd like to see more roads, bridges, construction going on, more rural broadband. But I also supported a Republican bill that has all of that in it, and it's paid for. It's paid for. And it doesn't have all of the Green New Deal and social engineering stuff in it as well. So, yeah. Well, I appreciate the time with you. I think what you see here today even though I'm sorry you have to go through the emotion of it, is what we deal with in government right now, because the federal government has grown too large, too strong, too powerful, and given our responsibilities even over to unelected bureaucrats. And then we've squashed the states. Article 10 in the US Constitution that gives primacy to the states, except in a few things. We've squashed that. And now we come to a pandemic that in the past we went through. We went through pandemics. And we never locked down or put personal mandates on our people like we're doing now. We're in a dangerous situation, folks. We need to stand together, link arms as Americans, believing that our country is still the greatest gift to the world that's been ever given. But we're going to have to fight for it. And yes, the word is fight. The word truly is fight. And we can't get locked up in individual concerns at the expense of doing the larger good of pulling back control from the federal government.
What do you mean by fight?
Steve, take a break.
Really?
Shut up, Steve. Shut up, Steve.
Just popped into my mind with what you were
Don't
saying.
answer that.
Is there anything?
Go to the dictionary, Stephen, you can do that.
Is there
Like
anything
physical
you can
violence.
do to stop Nancy
Isn't that what
Pelosi
Democrats were doing, Steve?
from using those proxy
You said
votes?
fight.
That gives her way
Physical
too
violence?
much power.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you. Proxy votes are also, I believe, unconstitutional.
Yes.
We filed a federal lawsuit, the House Republican Conference, federal lawsuit, and they're dragging. That was over a year ago we filed that, when she put proxy in. So, I mean, that's what we're facing. That's where the election has to change, because day one, I believe the Republicans will take control in 2022 in the House. The Senate, we'll wait and see, but the House, I believe we will take back. Proxy voting is done. Members of the Democrat Party who have not shown up since proxy voting was put in place and have voted from their homes, from their boats, and other places
Their yachts.
are going to have to come back, or else their vote doesn't count. And that's the way it is. But that takes an election to do it. And that's, as I sit on the floor and have to go through a metal detector because Nancy says some of her people are afraid that I'm going to carry a gun to the floor and shoot a Democrat on the floor.
After you tell people to fight, you know.
There's no reason for that. I'm not even a member of BLM. And I say BLM, not Black Lives Matter, because Black lives do matter. But BLM is a Marxist organization. I'm not a member of that, so why would you worry about me hurting somebody on the floor of the House? This is the type of stuff, wearing masks on the floor and threatening to arrest our staff and visitors that come. I mean, if the science says, according to Fauci, that if I've been vaccinated, I don't have to worry about getting it. And if you're concerned about me giving it to you, then wear a mask. It keeps you from getting a cold. I'll give you that. But I think if masks were so good, we probably wouldn't have had so much COVID.
Masks don't stop viruses.
I concur with you. But that's what I read in science. There are other scientists that say
Which
otherwise.
scientist did you read that in?
Stephen, not the garbage you're reading. So thanks for being here
Even
today,
all the
folks.
sciences match those
And
comments.
I
Get a
wouldn't
medical
say
degree
they
for
Ah.
their comments.
Well,
One thing you ought to
When
do,
you
put a
said
smile on
something-
your face as much as possible. At least it makes a Marxist feel worried. Have a good day.
Thank you, man. All right.
Hey,
Oh,
Mark,
he's a character.
right turn, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, you get a question, okay.
You said responsible against common sense.
There you go. Yeah, I made
You gotta use common sense.
Yeah, for sure. Great.
Where's the next town hall gonna be?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Who's your new wife?